Hello again, my name's John. I'm a retired cook from the northeast of England in the UK, and welcome to my latest bread video. In this one, I'll attempt to take the mystery out of how to make a 100% whole wheat flour loaf that is light, crispy and absolutely delicious. It's very simple to make as it uses the no-knead method. If you're not familiar with the no-knead method, all it means is you allow the yeast to do the bulk of the work by giving it the time to form the gluten strands naturally. And the main reason for this is not to make life easier for you, it's because it greatly improves the flavour and the texture of the bread. And it also uses very simple basic bread making ingredients. I'll be making it entirely by hand, but you can use a stand mixer to do the initial mix. Okay, I'll start by adding 1 teaspoon of sugar to the lukewarm water. And this is a 70% hydration bread, by the way, so it's quite a wet, sticky dough. Before adding the yeast, I'll check the temperature of the water, which should be around 40 degrees Celsius, that's 105 Fahrenheit. And that's just about spot on. So I'll add the yeast and give it a good mix. Then I'll set it aside for a few minutes to make sure the yeast is alive and well. It's always better to test your yeast before making up the full recipe. It's also a good idea to warm up the bowl before starting the recipe by filling it with hot water for a couple of minutes, especially if it's a thick glass bowl like the one I'm using. Now I like to mill my own whole wheat flour, so I thought it may be of interest to show you how I do this using my home milling machine. And this is the wheat I use. It's a high protein organic wheat that I buy online. Now obviously I don't expect everyone to mill your own flour, but when you do buy your whole wheat flour, make sure it contains at least 14 grams of protein. Check the ingredients list on the side of the flour bag, and that's 14 grams of protein per 100 grams of flour. Your flour brand may say per serving, so you'll just have to work it out yourself depending on what that serving is. And here's a little info on wheat you may also find interesting. Basically, a wheat kernel is made up of 3 main parts: the endosperm, the bran and the germ, as you can see in this diagram. In whole wheat flour, the whole kernel is ground up to make the flour. When making white flour, only the endosperm is used. Even the germ is removed from the white flour because the germ's high fat content can limit the shelf life. And finally, the main nutrition whole wheat flour provides us with is fibre, protein, carbohydrates, iron and B vitamins. In other words, it's pretty healthy stuff. And that's my flour done. 600 grams of wheat in and 600 grams of whole wheat flour out. Marvellous. Right, after that little detour, and get back to the bread recipe now. Okay, add the whole wheat flour to the warm bowl, then add 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. If you're using table salt, just 1 teaspoon. And using a whisk, mix that thoroughly into the flour. Once the salt has been mixed in, it's time to add the wet ingredients, starting with the yeast mixture. And after letting it sit for a couple of minutes, you can clearly see the yeast has started to activate, which means the yeast is healthy and ready to use. So I'll pour it into the flour, then add the oil and mix the whole lot together. And as most of my regular viewers will notice, I seem to have misplaced my trusty wooden spoon, so I'll just have to use this spatula. It's not the same, but I'm sure it'll work out fine. And like I said at the beginning of the video, you can use a machine to do this initial mix, but don't overmix it. Just mix it enough until it comes together. In real time, this only took me about 90 seconds to do. So, unless you have a reason for not mixing by hand, it's hardly worth using and having to clean your stand mixer down afterwards. Right, once the dough has come together, cover it. I use the shower cap for this, but you can use cling film or plastic wrap, or even a clean damp tea towel, and let it sit in a warm draft-free spot for 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, the dough should have at least doubled in size. Now slightly wet the worktop like I do in the video, and with wet hands knock the dough back by giving it a few turns as shown in the video. Then place it back in the bowl and this time let it rise for 30 minutes. If it starts to get a bit too sticky to handle, just wet your hands again. This stage of knocking the dough back or degassing should only take about 30 seconds. This is a very important step in developing the taste and the texture of the finished bread. And while you're waiting for this final rise in the bowl, you can grease a 2 pound, that's a 900 gram loaf tin. If you watched my sandwich bread video, you'll be familiar with this improvised proving box method to rise the dough in the baking tin. All you do is part fill the sink with hot water about 10 minutes before the final rise in the bowl. It'll become apparent a little later on how it works. I'll also suggest another method if you don't have a storage container like this one. Right, once the 30 minutes is up, slightly wet the bench again and turn out the dough. And if you've followed all the steps I've shown, you'll notice that the dough now feels much smoother and lighter to the touch. Okay, all you have to do now is flatten out the dough to a 10 by 7 inch, that's approximately a 25 by 12 centimetre rectangle. Making sure your bench is slightly wet but not flooded, or the dough will stick to a dry worktop. Now roll it towards you, tucking in the edges as you go. Once it's rolled up, tuck in the ends too. Then get it into the pre-greased loaf tin, seam side down as shown in the video. Once the dough's in the tin, lightly press it around the edges to fill in any gaps that might be there. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you don't have or don't want to use a proving box, just sprinkle a little flour on top of the dough and cover it with a lightweight tea towel and allow it to rise in a warm draft-free place until it has risen just above the rim of the loaf tin. This could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the temperature of your house. But by using this improvised proving box, you're taking more control over the rise. So I'll place the loaf tin in the box on top of a warm, wet, clean cloth. This will stop the tin from sliding around, and it will also help keep a moist atmosphere inside the box. Now I'll place the lid on with a heavy weight on top that will stop the box bobbing about, and set the timer for 30 minutes. It may even take a little shorter time than that. Just keep an eye on it and don't let it rise too much above the tin, as it will keep on rising when it's in the oven. The water in the sink should be around 40 degrees Celsius, that's about 105 Fahrenheit. When there's only 10 minutes left on the timer, preheat your oven to 190 degrees Celsius, that's 375 degrees Fahrenheit or gas mark 4. I'm setting mine to 170 as my oven is fan assisted and it runs about 20 degrees hotter than indicated on the dial. Okay, I had to reset the timer to 20 minutes as the dough was rising quicker than I anticipated. So like I mentioned earlier, keep an eye on it. If it goes too far, there's a danger it may fall over at the edges in the oven and end up looking like a giant mushroom. But this one is just about perfect. There's a slight gas bubble appearing at the side, but that'll be okay. Right, I'll get it straight into the preheated oven and set the timer for 30 minutes. But I'll turn the loaf around for even cooking just past halfway through the cooking time. Okay, that's the 30 minutes up and it's looking pretty good and the aroma is absolutely amazing. I've been baking bread at work and at home for over 40 years and the smell of fresh baking bread in the oven never gets old. Right, I'll release it from the tin immediately, and what I do now, although it is cooked and looks great, I like to put it back into the oven for a further 5 minutes to crisp up and darken the crust a bit more. And there it is, a light, crispy, delicious whole wheat loaf made at home using basic bread making ingredients. That's flour, water, yeast, oil, sugar and salt. Not forgetting a pinch of effort, time, love and knowledge. Wonderful. Right folks, all I have to do now is the obligatory taste test, but I just know it's going to be fantastic. And as you can hear, the crust is really crisp and the texture inside looks very nice and light. It's still on the warm side, but it can't wait any longer. Right, I'll just apply some of my homemade butter. If you're interested how I make this butter, you can check out the video on my channel. I'll leave a link in the description box below the video. I'll also post a link to my white flour sandwich bread video too. And just as I thought, it has an amazing texture when you bite into that crispy crust and that soft chewy crumb inside and that unmistakable whole wheat flavour. Excellent result. And this bread definitely gets the thumbs up from me. I know I always say this, but I really do hope you try this yourself. It's the only way you'll truly understand how amazing this bread is. Well, thank you again for watching. Please like, share, comment and subscribe by hitting the circle above. If you do subscribe, activate the bell icon next to the subscribe button on my channel page. And by doing that, you'll be automatically notified every time I upload a new video. And in the meantime, here's a few of my other videos you may want to watch. So, until the next time, be safe in the kitchen and bye for now.